Hi everyone, I'm Austin Smith, and my capstone research project was on using Edmodo for online revision among middle school students. To start with a little bit of background, the reason why I wanted to focus on revision is that revision is often a neglected and a misunderstood step to the writing process. In my experience with middle school students, I've noticed that they confuse revision and editing. In the classroom, we try to teach that revision involves big changes to ideas and to the structure of the paper, whereas editing is just the final polishing. The reason why I chose to use Edmodo is because adolescents thrive in online environments. They've always got access to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Edmodo is another one of those options. There has been success for college students and adults using online revision through college courses and through adult education courses, but I haven't found very much research online about the use of online programs for revision with adolescents, and very little at all about using the Edmodo platform for revision, especially since Edmodo is becoming a more and more accepted and more widely used platform. Through my review of literature, I found several benefits and drawbacks for the use of Edmodo and of similar online environments in the classroom. And the benefits are that adolescents use online environments often, between Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and now Edmodo, which is getting more and more use in middle schools and high schools as a way for teachers to connect to their students and to the parents of those students. One of the big benefits of Edmodo is that it provides a safe environment where students are shielded from the outside world and where their work can't be searched by the general public. Some of the drawbacks of using an online environment are that often anonymity breeds negativity, meaning that students who don't have to look their peers in the face are more likely to be negative than positive. There are still misunderstandings that arise, and often these social environments require intensive training in order to be used correctly. For example, I spend 2 or 3 weeks at the beginning of each semester teaching the 6th graders in my technology class the proper way to use Edmodo, how to properly comment, how to reply to someone else's comment, and the basics of internet etiquette. For my research, I've decided to focus mainly on the quantitative aspects of using Edmodo for online peer review. And the research questions I looked at were, what impact does online peer review have in creating a difference in the amount and quality of revisions that students complete as compared to face-to-face peer revision? And in that case, I wanted to look at the amount of global revisions versus the amount of local revisions, and I wanted to look at the amount of revisions overall, comparing Edmodo to a control group of offline revising. The second question was, can Edmodo serve as a viable platform for online peer revision? I wanted to find out if the logistics were sound in using Edmodo. And third was, does online peer revision encourage students to provide more positive or negative commentary than face-to-face peer revision? And in that case, I wanted to find out if anonymity really did breed negativity, and if the online environment in which the student wasn't able to see the person he or she was talking to would make that student more likely to be negative. For the participants in my survey, I used 2 intact technology classes that I was teaching at the time, which makes it a convenient sample. In order to make sure that the students were as honest as possible and there was no bias based on me being their teacher, I had a colleague of mine come in and take over the class during this experiment. There were a total of 44 students who participated. I sent out more consent forms, but only 44 came back. There were 16 in the control group, and that was one particular class, and there were 28 in the experimental group, and that was a different class. One of the problems that I came up with in the end was that the 2 classes had different language arts teachers, so there were some differences in the 2. Demographically, the group was largely white. Many were gifted students because it's our STEM technology class, and most were in the exceeds range in math and science on their state standardized testing from last year. The methodology for my study was that all students completed the writing assignment, even the ones who had not returned their consent forms. It was part of a blog post writing assignment that spanned the entire semester in the technology class. All students were asked to revise using the praise, question, polish method, in which they provided one thing that their partner had done well, a question that they had about the overall work, and some different ways that their partner could polish the work to make it better. The control group, they did face-to-face, in-class revision for 45 minutes. The experimental group was given 45 minutes of class time to do revision on Edmodo, and they were asked to sit away from the partners that they chose. In addition, both classes were afforded another 20 to 45 minutes the following day to either accept or reject the revisions and turn in a final draft. The data examined was the total revisions suggested versus the total revisions that were accepted, as well as global and local revisions accepted versus suggested. And I looked at the total comments and the difference between positive and negative comments. And usually what I counted as positive comments were the ones in the praise section, whereas the negative comments typically came in question or polish. The data from my study found that the control group actually submitted more suggested revisions. However, the experimental group accepted more revisions and accepted a higher percentage of revisions than did the control group. Furthermore, the experimental group, the group that used Edmodo, suggested more global revisions and fewer surface revisions, so it was more real revision with the experimental Edmodo group as opposed to just editing with the face-to-face group. And then I also found that the Edmodo group accepted far more of the global revisions than did the face-to-face control group. In terms of commentary provided during my study, the control group provided 37 comments, 15 of which were positive, 22 were negative. Meanwhile, the experimental group provided 74 comments, so almost twice as many comments. 38 of those were positive, 36 were negative. As it turned out, rather than the online anonymity environment providing more negative comments, the face-to-face group gave more negative comments, and the online group was far more positive. One thing that I came up with to explain this was that students have been so well versed in using Edmodo and the way to comment on their peers' work in Edmodo and how to comment during a discussion that teaching has bled over into their just becoming second nature to them. In conclusion, my study found that using Edmodo for peer revision led to fewer revisions overall. However, students who used Edmodo to revise their peers' work were more likely to accept the revisions that were suggested to them and were more likely to provide global revision suggestions that would get to the heart of the paper and improve the overall work, as opposed to local revisions about word choice or grammar mistakes. Additionally, there were more positive comments than negative comments from the Edmodo group, and there were many more comments overall from the Edmodo group as compared to the control group who revised face-to-face in class. My overall conclusion about Edmodo is that it was effective as a method of revising online, but it was very time-consuming to set up. In the case of my class, I set up additional Edmodo classes solely for the purpose of this study. And in each of those classes, I assigned the partners for the revision work to small groups within that class so that the two students who were revising each other's work were the only ones that were allowed to see their work. And that provided some privacy for the rest of the class and some privacy for their comments. However, it took a long time to set up the additional classes and to assign the students to small groups and to assign the students a revision partner. So unless this was something that a teacher was willing to put in the work, it may not be as effective. My overall opinion of my capstone research, first off, is that the study itself was limited. I would rather have been able to use a larger sample, given the opportunity. I would have preferred to work with students that were in a language arts class so that they weren't pulled out of their element and they maybe would provide a much more honest opinion about the use of Edmodo for revision. I would also like to have done a little bit of opinion research to find out if students were going to be more likely to use Edmodo in the future and if the ones who were in the control group would like to be using Edmodo instead. Overall, I was also not particularly satisfied with my research topic. Doing the research over such a long period of time, I actually changed positions at my school from working with language arts teachers and students in language arts and teaching writing to teaching technology as part of a STEM program. And my interests have also changed. However, with the study still being in place, I think I got some good data and I got some good experience as far as the process of conducting a research study like this for the future. So overall, I enjoyed the experience, but the topic sort of started to wear on me as we came to the close. I hope you've enjoyed my research presentation, And if you have any questions, feel free to comment.